Of course, the usual Ford and Chevy, but mostly Mustangs, Ford Fox bodies, LA street racers, running hard, turbo, street cars. Eventually stuff got serious, so there we go. Racing for Ford Motorsports through Kaufman Products. Then the 5.0 revolution was rolling pretty doggone big. And that's my car on the right. And the other road racing cars of Kaufman Products, sponsored by Ford Motorsports. Of course, me at Palmdale breaking in the new 347 engine I just put together with the then experimental prototype trick flow twisted wedge heads. We got it working this time and made pretty good power. For a shootout at sundown, right there at Bakersfield, this is the heyday of the 5.0 versus Grand National through the 90s that started the new muscle car revolution. And all through that Mustang craziness, helped out with a book by Isaac Martin for HP Books. Everybody wanted to know what is going on with this new Mustangs and their Windsor engines. And here's one of the books I was involved with. Our 5.0, sponsored by Storm & Norman, Pro Mustang, with the official program of the Fun Ford Weekend, where I won a bunch of races here on the West Coast. First 10, 9-second pass, highest mile an hour for the event, and of course winning the race. All the races on the West Coast. Eventually I end up driving the U.S. Army race car, doing break-in passes at Irwindale Speedway. Written all over this car are the names of all the soldiers that passed on in the War on Terror. Much respect. Really got me thinking, coming from a family of military servicemen. This was a lot of pride to drive this car. Good morning, good day, good evening, whatever part of the world you're tuning in from. Welcome. Glad that you can join us. Today we will talk about cylinder heads. And you know what? I got a lot of feedback from you guys talking about you like to hear more stories about things I've gone through, and there's a lot, the good and the bad. I will share that in snippets to everybody else so that we all learn as I have learned. Okay, for the most part, it is a vicious world out there. All right, and one thing I found out is that today with CNC, whatever port is in this one company, if you look at another company, they probably stole it from that other manufacturer, digitized it and produced it. Dozens and dozens and dozens. Just like when you call for a cam profile, you say your cylinder head port, CC, you know, all these things, this detailed specification you share with them. Wow, they come up with exactly the same cam profile because they're using the same program. Okay, same thing with the cylinder heads today. All right, so let's get back to the subject. I just got thrown off there, but I wanted to stress that it is well known, if you already have a cylinder head that's ideal for your bore and stroke, meaning the port volume is perfect and makes good power. And this is not a rarity. The driver will say, well, you know what, I want a little bit more flow. I wonder if this guy can pick up the airflow out of this cylinder head that I have. Let's say I have a Glidden Victor or a Yates. I wonder if he can pick up the airflow and give me more power. Well, if it's already ideal, if you try to pick up on the basis of just airflow, we all know for a fact, but if it's already ideal and you make it larger, it will pick up airflow, no doubt. But one important aspect that people forget, when you make anything bigger, if it's already ideal, you lose velocity. And you know for a fact, excuse me, there's hardly anybody that will disagree with me. If you have the ideal port velocity, okay, and port size. Anything that you might try to improve will cost you somewhere down the RPM range. Maybe the mid-range. Maybe every time you catch the next gear, it tends to just flatten out a little bit, then pick up again. That's an indication of when you lose some kind of velocity. When you drop on the lower RPM, okay, the port is flowing a little bit slower. Remember, it's not about flow. It's a combination of velocity at what speed that engine builder or cylinder head guy is looking at, okay, and the port volume. Two important aspects. Then flow. Now, I don't think you'll find anybody when you give them a cylinder head say, hey man, I broke the super stock record, or I broke the record of this one kind of racing. I want you to pick up and look for more power for me. Many will try to perhaps cut down on your bearing diameter to free up some power. Thinner ring pack, you know, your 043 now, maybe your 028, nappier secondary, so forth, so on. But in order for that guy, when you look at his cylinder head, to pick up airflow, okay, and I've come across many when I look at this, they go, you know what, this is good enough, man. This doggone port, it's very impressive. And you know what? The only recourse is going to change this flow bench here. He's going to make it bigger, so pick up airflow. Does that mean you're going to pick up power? Probably not. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, this is about 25 years ago, I had a single turbo small block Ford with DFSR heads when they first came out. This thing eventually ran in the 7-second pass. Now, when I built it first, the guy switched over from an NA combination. Now he wants to go turbo. I said, you know what, we got too much stroke on this thing. He's got a 4-stroke. I sure like to have this stroke at about 3.5 so I can RPM it and build boost on the upper RPM. And not only that, there's the start of the small tire 10-inch wide slicks at that time. And the owner insisted, no, let's just run it 427 inches. 125 times 4-inch stroke. That's 427 inches of small block. We then go to Vegas, and it spun from the start all the way to the end, just hazing the slicks. He goes, what happened? I said, I told you, we don't need stroke, we're boosted. Okay? And I like to rely on with the small tire especially, we don't need that much cubic to blow the slicks. I like a shorter stroke, big bore, and that's what we got to do. So anyway, this is a little side story, but it'll show to something else. So I distroked that to 3.5 by 4,125. I think it's 385 cubic inches now. And when I took it to Harvey's dyno, it made 1650 then. But now, significantly smaller, the heads was the choke point. All right? All the boosts that you can ram in there, there's a point where the head just don't want to do anymore. But this heads is pretty doggone good. All right? So now at 385 from 427, it made the same amount of power at the rear wheel. And we didn't even lean on the intercooler at that time. We had the intercooler pump not running. We just wanted to see it like 15 pounds. Made 1650. Very impressive. But eventually, the team disintegrated. Driver went one way, who was instrumental in how this car was put together, besides me building the engine. Somebody took over, looked at the heads, wanted to change and make more power with the heads, and the machine shop that we dealt with that said, what are you trying to do? This thing is already impressive. It's hardly any boost. It's making 1600 at like 15 pounds. What do you want to do? It's already flowing pitching. I think I want a little bit more, so forth, so on. Well, I don't know what happened to this thing. If they did flow it bigger, guess what? It came back out. It can't even run in the nines. It lost all sorts of speed. What happened? It was already ideal. They probably made the port so much bigger, humongous. I can show one here. Exhaust port is humongous. It's a small block with humongous exhaust port. Like I said, velocity, when you really look at, when you port the head, you make it larger, you lose velocity. That's a given. Everything's ideal to start with. Okay? But if the port is a little, inferior the way it's configured, of course, when you make it bigger, you're going to pick up velocity and pick up flow. But I'm already talking ideal. Good short side, good ball work, everything. I will find it hardly anyone would disagree if I tell you my point of response to that is I make these things. This plate. Alright? I use 4 for every engine. I stack one and then the next one determines the height. So I stack both of them. I don't think you'll hardly find anybody to disagree with me or with anybody that when you decrease the port angle from low port to the short side and you raise it up and decrease the short side angle, you're going to pick up flow. Not only do you pick up flow, now the port doesn't have to do the ski jump on a low port layout to go to short side to the intake valve. Now it's coming in much faster. Did you hear what I said? Much faster. That means velocity is picked up. When I raise it half an inch, I raise the floor half an inch also with this. So really the port did not get any bigger because you did this. Alright? I went up half an inch, floor half an inch. The port remained constant. The same basic size. The plate might add a little bit, but almost insignificant, adding to the volume. You made it a little bit longer, a little bit. Okay, I didn't make it humongous. Now, the TFSR, which is one of the first ones I've done, the twisted wedge R, I can go up quite a bit, over half an inch. Okay, the AFR, the other ones, I go about 400. Now, manifold Willie, I can kick up the TFSR perhaps about 600 to 700s. That's almost 3/4 of an inch. It's up. Remember, when the port is straighter, going down, all right? When the intake valve closes, you already know you have a lot of flow then because it doesn't do this. It does this. Straight dive in to the valve. But what's critical about port velocity is that it's a port with good velocity recovers quicker. Because if the port speed is too slow because it has that ski jump to the short side to the valve, when it's coming in at a steeper angle, less angle, or it's coming in high port by port place like this, one very, very positive aspect of raising the port is that the port recovers quickly. Meaning, once the intake valve closes, the high port angle comes in, they all stack up. The airflow stacks up on top of the closed intake valve, faster than it was with a low port. So now the next intake event, the valve opens up, it goes in there, straight down, instead of doing this. Alright? Straight down because it's stacked up quicker. Now we have a low port, it doesn't stack up as fast. Now let's visualize this. If it's a low port, it may stack up only to here, right, before the next intake event. But since you have a high port, here's the intake valve, it stacks up this much. Okay? So when it opens up, shoom, it shoves right in. Therefore, when you take your existing cylinder head, Yates, Glidden Victor, whatever you have, and you say to this guy at the machine shop, the cylinder head guy, you know what, I'd like to get more airflow. Could you find more airflow out of this? Of course. Like I know one guy before, every time this racer brings the cylinder head, he surfaces the head. It takes 15 every doggone couple of months. He resurfaces the head gasket, the head surface, even though it doesn't need it. He just cuts it. So therefore, you go up to a guy and say, could you make more airflow out of this? Of course. He's going to make it larger. What else can he do? Right? If it's already a good cylinder head. I've seen enough there when I'm looking at that, I go, man, this cylinder head looks freaking impressive. I don't think I can help it anymore. It's already as good as it's going to get. And the only way I can get more airflow out of this is make it bigger, which is not the right direction to go. Because I know the bigger the port, I'm going to lose velocity, which is the ramming effect into the intake valve. It also affects port recovery, of course, to make that port stack up columns of air on top of the closed intake valve. It is considerably lessened. My neighbor's dog is barking, rare. But anyway, excuse the doggies. This is where we're at with this configuration. Hardly anybody, well, I should say hardly, I know everybody, well, many out there will say, I'll make it bigger. All right? And I tell you what, I've seen enough where the doggone thing got bigger and end up slowing it down. All right? Because when you're already ideal, you're already ideal. And the next configuration you got to do is change to a different head. Let's say you have an inline AFR, you want to switch over to a Yates, or because you want more airflow. Not only is the piston now different, the piston configuration because of the combustion chambers is different. The rocker arms are different, the head studs are different, the manifold are different. Okay, there's so many different, push rod length is all different, everything's changed. Therefore, if you already have an existing cylinder head, you got to change that, and the only way you could do is make it larger. I don't think anybody could pick up the airflow except if that one very good cylinder head guy missed something on the port floor or something on the roof or one side of the port. I hardly doubt that. If it's good, it's good. All right? Like I had one billet Yates heads here. It flowed 385 CFM. Impressive. Could I have done anything more to that and make it look stupid? No. They got to tell me, hey, could you do better than that? I said, no, I can't. I was up front. It's good. But you know, but you're sharp. Well, yes, but there's a lot sharper guys than I am. But I'll tell you what, this thing is good. The port wasn't overly big. It's not, it's high. It's very high. Therefore, I don't think I can improve it anymore. But there's always somebody, that will say, oh yeah, I can pick it up. But anyway, but this port is how I machine it. And this one here is from Ford Motorsport. You see that on the catalog. Look at the difference in the length. Okay? But it's still the same port spacing, but right here, right at the very end, this is short. And what happens is that you have the last manifold bolt, it's hanging up there in the air. Alright? And I'm afraid it'll bust and crack on the end of the manifold. Whereas here, I corrected that issue. Then I leave this blank to cover the water port. So it's up to you to drill a hole, okay, for your coolant. If you want to take the water out of the manifold, or like what I prefer, I keep this closed and you just drill the front of the head and take your water out from the front and a little bit on the back as a bleed hole. Therefore, I don't think anybody would disagree with me that when you decrease the port angle in order to pick up any cylinder head that's already good, AFR let's say, or the TFSR or the Brodix, when you kick that up, like I said, the TFSR up to 700, almost 3/4 of an inch, I can kick that up. When it's kicked up that high, you're going to pick up 30 to 35 CFM. Perhaps more if you change the short side radius, which I have not. And by that I get around 30 to 35 CFM. When you look at the catalog between a 200 to 220 or 225 AFR, that's 20 cc more, 25 cc more of intake port volume. But guess what? Now we are looking at the AFR 205 Ford at 700. It's flowing 317 at 715, or 750, it's flowing at 320. Now at the same time, when you look at the same head now at 220, flows 325 at 700, a slight increase, and at 800 lift, it's at 331. Check it out again. Reviewing the chart, the 205 flowed at 317, 700 lift, and the 220 flowed 325 at 700 lift, a gain of 8 CFM. Now the 205 is 320 at 750, and the 220 331 at 800, a gain of 11 CFM. That's a big jump in port volume with just that much flow gains. So take note of the plates. Now we are comparing the small block Chevy 200 or 220 versus the 227. When you look at the upper scale at 600 lift, they're both the same, 312. But the 227 at 650 dumped 3 CFM, 318 to 315. What happened there is probably a loss in velocity because of the bigger port. Now, when you look at the 220, the competition flow chart, 322 at 650, and the 227 is 322 at 650. Now it peaks at 329 at 750, and it's only 326 at 700 with the 220 competition flow chart. So that's a difference of roughly 3 CFM. Not very much. That's 650. The 220 is at 322. And then the 700 lift, at 650, it's 322 as well. Almost the same. So there you see the gains. Not very much. That is good. All right? But when you do this and you gain 35, 30 CFM with the same port volume, I don't think anybody would disagree with me. Okay? That the doggone port that picks up velocity and of course flow, because now it's straighter, will make more power. I bet you almost all across the board. Whereas the conventional way of making the port bigger by not racing it, you're going to lose some velocity, you're going to lose some low or mid-range power. May pick up on the top end, perhaps too late. But if you pick up airflow and velocity throughout the RPM range by straightening out the floor or the port, so having the ski jump to the short side and come down on the low port, now you're up. I don't think you'll hardly see anybody say, this guy's not making any sense. High port works. That's why we have sheet metal intake. Those are high port. Same thing with a cylinder head. A Yates is very high compared to a standard AFR or whatever. All those Grand Canyon helicopters are going by right now. Anyway, so those are what I perceive to be the next improvement, is to plate the head. And guess what? I plate all the heads. When somebody brings me an engine says, Ben, what do we do to make it a little bit more power? Let's plate the head. So I have all these cars. Man, I like to join those guys going to the Grand Canyon. So there you go. We do that, port plated, pick up airflow, pick up velocity, and I tell you what, everybody I've done that work for are very happy. They said, damn, this thing making a little bit more power. But the only backdrop to this thing is I did one for Erwin Couillard, one of my hardest running guys out there, good buddy, it's like family to me. I port plated his Blue Thunder heads. Okay, and now it's summer. He's spinning the tires off there. He couldn't get no hookup. He got chassis issues, but he picked up about 3 miles an hour in the 8th mile. In the process, his engine, the crank came apart. It grounded everything because, you know, like we found out on the dyno, when you don't have a center counterweighted crankshaft, it wants to twist to an S. And like I said on my previous videos, when you look at the block, number 2, number 4 main is going to be wiped out. 1, 3, and 5 is going to look okay. When 2 and 4 is wiped out because the crank twists to an S. Okay? It was a twist to an S. When you're making a lot more power than you used to. When his head wasn't plated yet, he made so much power. Okay, I think this car ran a 540 the way it was configured with a turbo 400 or something like that. And now, he was running basically the same, but the mile an hour is up. I mean, 2 to 3 miles an hour. It's telling you something. Anytime you see a upwards in the, you know, he made one pass where his mile an hour was so high, he was like going, man, this thing's, how much mile an hour am I going to get out of this thing? It's very impressive. That's an indication, mile an hour is an indication, regardless of the ET. If let's say you went 540 before at 123, now you went 124, 125, that's telling you, you got more power. Fix the bottom end, or fix your traction. Because mile an hour tells you an indication of additional power. So now, when he showed me his bearing, and 2 and 4, he said, he was messed up, yeah. That crank was twisting to an S, because now it's making more power beyond what is capable of doing. Like we were on the dyno not that long ago. We have a non-counterweight crankshaft, and we made 786 horsepower and only 7,000 RPM. All right, and the crank started twisting around to the point that the crank triggers hitting the dampener. That's what I tell you, something's going awry. Okay, so also let me warn everybody, please, when you're going to build a series engine, start new if possible. Don't build an engine, whatever the intent is, with used parts from somebody that you don't know, or you have no history about, or you don't even know who these guys are. Because you really don't know if the doggone thing has been used and abused. Okay? And when I first got this engine, I already had an indication that it was run hard. Because when I took off the C-clips on the piston, it won't come out. The piston pin was shoved into the rod in the piston. Guess what? It was hammered. Okay, so that's what we ended up running, and of course the crank started twisting. It's probably about to snap in half. All right, so just a word of advice. Comparing the Glidden Victor Edelbrock, called GV2 Ultra Rare, and against the SC1 Yates Ford Motorsports. Here's the Glidden GV2 on the left and the Yates SC1 on the right. The Yates SC1 slightly shorter, on the floor is lower, and on the roof is lower compared to the GV2. The GV2 is like the Pro King, very impressive. All right, so there's a difference. Here is the difference between the SC1 and the original Yates C3L. Look at the bottom, how much lower this is. And if you can just put a little bigger valve on the C3L, you can get it to be close to an SC1 without the extra money. And I'll show that next. And it should be very, very interesting. Look at that, it's quite a bit of height difference. Now we're looking at one plate added to the C3, and look at the difference. Very close in height. All right? And what we have to do is, the valve cover rail is still there. Okay, so we're gonna add one more plate and let's see what happens. Okay, sorry for that, I'm just holding it with a piece of fuel pump eccentric. But look at the height of the intake port. This one slid down a little bit, but you can already see the difference. All right, by the time I epoxy or weld the floor and moved it up, I can move it up a little bit more, but it basically equals the height of the SC1. Okay, so there we are. The advantages of the plate. You can see it. So for you guys of the old school C3L, don't lose hope. You can help it. And if you can equal the intake valve size of the SC1, the better off you're gonna be. Okay, and you use the same push rods, studs, rocker arms, everything. There you go. The following pictures here will show what a race-plated port and how it compares to the SC1 and the Glidden Victor 2 heads or even the Pro Kings. So it is rather impressive considering you're not paying the big dollars. Just a modification here that takes a lot of patience and know-how. Note the height of the TFS R head on the right and comparing that to the Glidden Victor Pro King Yates type cylinder heads on the left. See the angle? It's very, very low compared to this all-out racing cylinder heads. Next, you're looking at the first part of the plate, the primary plate that is bolted on to the TFS head. And look at where it's stepped up right now. And let's see what's coming up. Now you're looking at how high the port got. All right, so we can still kick this up some more. All right, so look how much excess port you have, and then you weld that or epoxy it. It should be the same, but it's pretty much SC1 height. Should improve the flow by about 30 to 35 CFM when you do the short side correctly, but that is a big jump. All right, so that's way different than the stock port height. This is before I bolted on the plates. You can see how much it went up. That's quite significant. This is the TFSR, and the valve cover rail is way up there. So it's able to raise it a significant amount. Perhaps the best among the stock type low port, original low port layout that is best modified with plates. TFSR, it lends itself to be raised quite a bit, as much as the Blue Thunder on I feel is the best for strokers, is the best production type cylinder head out there you can buy for big stroker Ford Windsors on the street and also for the racetrack, especially when you have a heavy car. You can see the intake port plates here. I got this raised about ½ an inch. Very impressive. And I cut the bottom of the Victor Jr. and you can see the valley plate. And I take the water out of the side of the head. I completely block the water or the thermostat. This passage here is completely blocked. That's why you see this. I cut off and welded a plate there. And I'm using a TFS external thermostat housing. Here's another picture from the right side. You can see the hoses there. You can put braided if you want, or some of the high quality black hose, which I prefer. But this, you can buy this from TFS. It's pretty good. But remember, make sure you block that water port right there. This plate is solid, so it blocks the water port. So no big deal. You don't have to block the head itself. The plate did that for us already. T&D rockers, this is for the LA. And I use a restrictor here. I don't use a thermostat. Restrictor with a small diameter hole. And there's the temperature gauge sending unit right there. So it's pretty much user friendly. I like it. But like I said, If you're going to build a 408 or a bigger 4100 stroke or 4170 on the street, I suggest the longer stroke if you get some weight on the car, and an R head. And you could do this with a regular twisted wedge, 11R or the original twisted wedge, which I worked with on Storm and Norman's car before it came into production as a twisted wedge. But they are very impressive, especially for big cubic edge. Remember to always drill the hole as high as possible on the head, on the front or even the back of the head if you want to run a hose, a bleed hose. The reason is that when you have a water circulation here, if your water pump isn't very good, air bubbles can get trapped on top of the head. And a lot of pressure will push the air bubbles out over here and burp it out of the system. But if not, if it's too low right here, it's not very good, okay? Because the air bubbles will get trapped on top of the head. And then you have to drill some kind of a bleed type valve, okay? Or like a brake bleeder on a caliper. You install that on top of the head right here and bleed off on all four corners. But if you have a lot of pressure on your pump, that's not a problem. It's Giovanni's 421, isn't it? 422, yeah. Yeah, you can see the spacer on the heads right there and how we split that up to make it work. Dominator. So we should do more break-in passes. Vacuum pump. It's pretty good. The car is clean. Has got the water pump. Is it Messier? Yeah, Messier water pump.
Still running the alternator?
It's still running an alternator, which is pretty doggone good.
Stock radiator?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Metal?
Yeah, all metal. So we got some videos of this thing at the racetrack, just trying to break it in till we start dialing it in and really do a full bore run to it. So that's what we need. Yeah, I think you're over half an inch how much we picked this up. Because right there, the spacer underneath, and then the second one on top.
Yeah, it has two
and
spacers.
Then we cut the back of the Super Victor, so it's all hollow underneath. So air goes through, then it's got a valley pan right there. Oh, this is pretty good. Yeah, you can see the plate right there, underneath there. Yeah. Yep, right there. You can see the plate. Oh. You can see the part where I cut off the bottom of the Super Victor, and the valley pan is right on the back there. You can see the spacers and everything. That sucker's responsive.
Yeah, I hit the 5.2.
Really?
When I hit the shift light, yeah,
Sheesh.
5.2, so.
Well, there you go, folks.
Coming to the track near
There's
you.
basically a hot streak combination and 4/100 stroke. Not the regular 408 with a 4-stroke. This got another 100 thousandths on the stroke, which is what I prefer, like I said on the other videos. I prefer the 4/100 with somebody that wants a little bit more RPM, 4/170, a little lower in the RPM. And 408 is okay, but 4/100s I feel the best combo, especially with the R head. That is very hard to beat. Played in the 190, 200, 205, 220, 225. They all work to be plated. It'll give you a lot more response and power without even spending too much money. This is going to be hard to beat. Here is the plate, somewhat positioned right on the head. If you look closely, I have epoxy on top of these intake ports because the AFR is somewhat thin the way they are from the factory, so you can see pretty much, I think, the epoxy there, but it's been filled up, or if you want you can weld it. It's better off, but make sure the valves don't the valve seats don't warp or get out of position. Anyway, part of the valve cover rail I machined off, and one of the first plate goes flush with the valve cover rail to act for the part that came off. You can see it's thin here, but no big deal. Okay, that's how high the port gets to be, about 350 thousandths, a little less than 400s or 400. The plate is on there. There's a stock block, so that keeps it rigid. So the epoxy is applied and the port is raced. As you can tell, there's an oiling mod there too, because this is a stock block. It doesn't have the front oil crossover, so I put that in there. It is ported already, partially, but if you notice, this lip has to be machined, or you run an extra thick rubber type, I mean not a rubber type, but one of those Felpro super hard valve cover gaskets, or you can double up on the cork and you're going to be fine. Okay, look at the head port. Now it's actually taller than the valve cover rail. Here's the manifold as it's sitting on the plate. Look how high that is. Look at the gap right here. I had to cut that. Okay, and basically it looks ugly with a plate underneath and then this one. So I just took that off completely, machined it off, and then I put the plate, a thick plate, and now we're going to drill holes for the water hole because the water ports are plugged up. Or on this AFR you can run hoses on all four ends going to your TFS thermostat housing part that they sell. Now the 2828 manifold has been powder coated. It looks good. So did the valve covers. Okay, so make sure you mark which is front when you port this manifold, because you can switch this around and you don't know which way you're at. Okay, so make sure you number that manifold, or put like a mark front right at the flange maybe with an arrow, but it is looking pretty good.
sounded good. Nice.
Well, Erwin fired that engine up. Sure likes to play it crazy. Look like the doggone engine stand's gonna flip over. But anyway, here's where that engine's going to. And then we'll look at the engine in closer detail after it's been run. You guys are looking at the engine for the LAPD or the new LAPD race car. It's a small block for now, the startup engine, just to get the chassis going. Anyway, just to show everybody, it's a 351, and you can see the spacers on the intake port. That's why it's kicked up quite high. And I placed a spacer back there, a solid plate to anchor the whole block. If you look at here, there. Notice the short spacer. This is from Ford Motorsports. Unlike my personal spacers, go all the way to the end. Here you can see the stud is exposed because it's too short. It's got front towards a front type header system, and it's got a single dominator on a 2828 intake manifold. The water line, oil pump, external oil filter, and on the back here you can see the spacer on the intake manifold. This is the first one on an AFR that has done that. You can see the anchored, keep the block from splitting. Flex plate, and it's got a, okay, take off the scoop, and it's got a dominator in it. So black motif. So we're looking pretty good. External line going to the lifter valley because it's a stock block. So I have an external line going to the lifter valley because it usually starts there with a big camshaft. So here it is. And
Bad man.
ooh-wee.
Yeah, we got a little talent going on up in this. Wow. Nice.
Here is the tape. The one on the left is Huey's type of Blue Thunder head. The one on the right is Irwin's. And look at here. Look at the height of the valve cover rail. In Huey's, I machined this thing off and put the plate flush with the valve cover rail, and it went, and the top of the port went about there. Okay. On Irwin's, look how much higher this is. I filled the floor and I went up all the way to the top as well, way past the valve cover rail. Now what did it do? I didn't have Irwin's valves because he had to order them, but Huey's, after it was done, flowed roughly 415, 418 there, let's just say 420. I know my bench reads low by 10 CFM. I've proven that many times. So if that head flows between 415 and 420, this guy here, after it's been raised, how much did this thing flow? They both have the same 225 intake valve. Here it is, already assembled, valve springs, everything in there. It looks exactly like Huey's. I wonder. Here's the front shot of the engine. I really wonder who is really taller between the two, or how much taller. Well, we know already who's taller. There it is. It looks darn good. I wonder, they look almost the same. Well, that last picture was Irwin's. This is Huey's engine. Basically the same type Blue Thunder with race plates on the intake port. Yeah, there we go. Then check the pump. Oh, it is. I see it. Good.